The air in the room was thick with the scent of too many flowers. Jeremy opened his eyes to a wall of black-clad backs, shoulders trembling with manufactured grief. The collective sobbing was a low, rhythmic tide that washed over everything, artificial as a stage play. He moved, a slight shift of weight, and instantly the sound cut off. The heads snapped toward him in unison. A sea of pale faces with unnaturally dark, protruding eyes fixed on his own. They held a flat, accusatory stare. A woman near the front, her mascara leaving dark trails, hissed the words, "Why aren't you weeping?" A strange, detached part of Jeremy's mind found this dream fascinating. He managed a small, sorrowful smile, conjured a single tear at the corner of his eye, and caught it on his fingertip, holding it up like a tiny, glistening prize. "I am." The assembled mourners, seemingly satisfied, turned back to the casket. Their wailing recommenced that same practiced, syncopated rhythm. A fine, cold drizzle misted against the tall chapel windows, blurring the gray light of the overcast afternoon and letting a damp chill seep into the room. A voice, sharp with accusation, cut through the dirge from beside him. "Jeremy, you're happy about this, aren't you? That David is gone." Jeremy turned toward the sound, but his attention was immediately caught by the fall of dark hair that slid over his own shoulder. It was longer than he remembered, a sleek, obsidian curtain that felt foreign against his skin. He lifted a hand, letting the strands slip through his fingers, and noticed for the first time a small, vivid red mark on the back of his left hand, like a drop of dried blood. The voice persisted, edged with venom. "Cat got your tongue, Jeremy? Or do you have nothing to say for yourself?" Jeremy looked up finally. The speaker was a guy around his own age, built like a college athlete, dressed in expensive casual wear and sneakers that probably cost more than Jeremy's last car. His handsome face was twisted with a fury that seemed barely contained. The guy leaned in, his voice dropping to a threatening murmur. "I know it was you. I know you had something to do with David's death. Just you wait. When he comes back, we'll see what you have to say then." The name David echoed in Jeremy's head, a bell of familiarity. Just last week, driven by morbid curiosity, he'd tracked down a banned, notoriously graphic novel called The Vengeful. The protagonist's name was David. The story followed David, a young man murdered by a petty rival, who returns as a vengeful spirit with the help of a powerful mentor to exact a brutal, drawn-out revenge. The rival, coincidentally, shared Jeremy's name. His eventual fate, as described in the forums Jeremy had skimmed, was the stuff of nightmares, a prolonged, excruciating torment ending in dismemberment. A cold knot tightened in Jeremy's stomach. He took a sudden step forward, closing the distance until he was mere inches from the angry young man's face. In the dilated pupils staring back at him, Jeremy saw a reflection that was both intimately familiar and utterly alien. The face was his own, yet not. The features were sharper, more vividly defined, the dark hair framing a countenance that was arrestingly handsome but carried an arrogant, almost aggressive beauty his own milder face never possessed. No long hair, no crimson mark, and certainly no history of killing anyone named David. He pinched the skin on his wrist hard. The pain was immediate and real. It took him a few stunned heartbeats to accept it. This wasn't a dream. He had somehow fallen into the pages of that horrific banned book. A wave of icy dread washed over him. "What are you doing?" The guy spluttered, taking an involuntary step back, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. "Don't try to distract me, Jeremy. If you're really innocent, why don't you go pay your respects? Go on. Say your piece to David." The chapel was spacious, the casket flanked by massive arrangements of white lilies and chrysanthemums, their pristine, dewy blooms lending a bizarre, wedding-like opulence to the somber occasion. Near the front, what were presumably family members dabbed at dry eyes with handkerchiefs, their performed grief as transparent as the window glass. A heavy, synthesized organ melody seemed to press down from the vaulted ceiling. "Go on," the guy urged, a challenge in his eyes. Jeremy searched his newly acquired memories. This was Victor, a classmate. He adopted a tone of cautious confusion. "Victor, why are you so sure I'm responsible?" Victor gave a low, scornful laugh. "Don't play dumb. Everyone knows you and David had that huge blow-up last month. And who was the last person seen with him before he was found? You." David was healthy. His heart just stopped. "You expect me to believe that's normal? Don't think your pretty face works on me." David had been widely liked, known for his charm and generosity. This chapel was full of people who admired him. Despite his harsh words, Victor had kept his voice low, a small courtesy that marked him as someone with a softer core beneath the bluster, someone who could be persuaded. Jeremy met Victor's gaze, pouring every ounce of sincerity he could muster into his expression. "I swear to you, Victor, I didn't hurt David." His earnestness seemed to give Victor a moment's pause, but old biases won out. With a muttered curse, Victor gave him a firm shove toward the front of the room. Jeremy had no choice but to walk forward, the eyes of the mourners heavy on his back. The casket lid was partially open. Inside, a young man lay as if in deep sleep. David had strong, dark brows, eyes peacefully closed with long lashes casting faint shadows. His features were classically handsome, the pallor of death lending him a strange, delicate beauty. Yet, the longer Jeremy looked, a disquieting sensation grew. A subtle wrongness crept into the placid face. The gentle curve of the lips began to seem less like peace and more like a mask, hinting at something fractured and deeply unsettling beneath. It was exactly as the novel had described, a facade of kindness over a core of chilling intensity. David had been Jeremy's favorite character to read about. His mind flashed back to the long, analytical review he'd posted online, praising David's cunning and the brilliant hypocrisy of his persona. The backlash from David's fanbase had been swift and vicious. They'd called him cynical, heartless, incapable of seeing the tragic hero beneath. Now, facing the reality of that hero, a man who would soon become a ghost dedicated to his destruction, any academic appreciation vanished, replaced by raw, primal fear. He'd arrived too late. If he'd come earlier, perhaps he could have prevented David's death. Now, the only path forward was survival, and that meant outthinking a ghost. He needed to make David interested in him, to become a puzzle rather than just a target. But relying solely on the whims of a vengeful spirit was madness. He needed allies among the living. He needed to rewrite the narrative so completely that even if David came for him, others would see it as a tragic obsession, not justified retribution. The original David had needed the help of the mentor, Marcus, to exact his revenge. The dead had limits, but turning the living to his side would take time, a luxury he didn't have. As these frantic thoughts raced, a sudden, bone-deep chill gripped him. The air around the casket grew colder, a physical presence of dread that raised the hairs on his arms. Something was close, very close. Survival instinct screamed. In one fluid, desperate motion, Jeremy dropped to his knees on the plush carpet. The impact forced a shocked gasp from his lungs, and his eyes instantly welled with genuine, pain-induced tears that traced gleaming paths down his cheeks. "David," he choked out, his voice thick with a convincing tremor. "Why did you have to leave?" His actions were mostly lost in the general murmur of grief. He bent his head, shoulders shaking. "Please, don't be gone," he whispered, the words meant to be overheard. Victor, watching from a few rows back, frowned. Was Jeremy actually crying? He couldn't make out the words. Behind him, another classmate, Spencer, glided over. Spencer was ethereally pretty in a cold way, perpetually cradling a worn rabbit plush named Mr. Fluff. He had a dispassionate air but a notorious appetite for gossip. "Victor," Spencer murmured, his voice flat. "Why is Jeremy weeping?" Victor held a finger to his lips. "Let's get closer." Jeremy sensed their approach. Timing was everything. He let his voice hitch on a sob, just loud enough. You said you loved me. How could you leave after that? I was such a fool to turn you away. I see it now, David. I love you too." The words hung in the frigid air. The oppressive cold seemed to stutter, just for a second. Victor and Spencer froze a few feet away, their eyes wide. "Please, come back to me." Jeremy wept softly into his hands. "I don't believe you're really gone. I'll find out who did this. I'll find a way to bring you back. I swear I will." He let the performance wind down, then slowly rose to his feet, looking down once more at David's body. In the vengeful, David's spirit was not whole. It had been shattered, scattered. A fragmented soul couldn't be summoned, couldn't speak its grievances. That's why his rage was so potent, why it attracted Marcus. Jeremy was banking on that silence now. A dead man couldn't accuse him, but a story of unrequited love from beyond the grave. That would capture attention. More importantly, if David was seen as the obsessed lover, any attack on Jeremy would be viewed as a supernatural tragedy, not justice. It would buy him the time he desperately needed. Victor and Spencer retreated, thoroughly bewildered. "Do you think he's messing with us?" Victor whispered, his anger replaced by confusion. Spencer's pale fingers stroked Mr. Fluff's ear. "To what end? He's vain and petty, not clever. He'd be more likely to smirk than put on a performance like that." "But David and him?" Victor gestured helplessly toward Jeremy's striking, tear-streaked face. "When did that even happen?" "He mentioned rejecting David's confession," Spencer mused. "When was their falling out?" "Over a month ago," Victor said, already beginning to connect dots that weren't there. That explains why Jeremy was ranting about him constantly afterwards. Maybe he was confused, angry about the confession, and now with David gone, he realizes his true feelings. He shook his head, a dramatic sigh escaping him. It's like something out of a bad movie. Spencer, however, was focused on the practical. He said he wants to find the killer and bring David back. Victor's eyes widened. He wants to try a summoning? As they spoke, Jeremy approached them, his expression one of fragile resolve. Victor and Spencer regarded him with a new, complicated uncertainty. The idea that he would lie about something that could so easily be disproven by a summoned spirit seemed ludicrous. "Jeremy," Victor began, awkward now. You really want to try to contact him?" Jeremy gave a slow, solemn nod. "I have to." Victor and Spencer exchanged a glance. The willingness to face the spirit spoke volumes. Victor's posture softened. His relationship with David had been one of distant admiration. The man was charming but always kept a polite distance from everyone. The idea that Jeremy might have been the exception, the secret object of David's affection, reshaped everything. I guess I owe you an apology," Victor mumbled, looking at the floor. "I jumped to conclusions. Sorry. Look, when David's spirit makes contact, we'll get the truth." Jeremy offered a grateful, watery smile. "Sorry, Victor," he thought. "Your friend's spirit isn't coming back for a chat." He glanced a final time at the casket. "Weren't we supposed to handle that case at the Excelsior Hotel today? We should go." The three of them were students in the University of Northwood's highly exclusive paranormal studies and applied metaphysics program. There was only one section with 8 students total. This field trip to the funeral was a detour from a sanctioned off-campus investigation to earn academic CR. Jeremy was desperate to see this new world's rules, to begin gathering the tools he'd need to survive. "I've been coasting," he admitted, layering regret into his voice. "Satisfied with being mediocre. But if I'm going to find justice for David, I need to be better. Starting with this hotel case. I'm done with the old me." Victor, stirred by this display of resolve, clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the spirit, man. We've got your back." Spencer gave a slight, approving nod. Redemption is always possible, provided one is sincere. A faint, melancholic smile touched Jeremy's lips. "I fear I may have started too late." They slipped out of the chapel as discreetly as they could. Outside, under the leaden sky, a heavy-set man with a sweaty, dissipated look about him reached out as if to brush against Jeremy. Victor, with reflexes born of constant vigilance, yanked Jeremy aside. "What's your problem?" The man's eyes darted away. "Nothing. Just lost my balance." Jeremy studied him, a flicker of intuition sparking. Spencer, meanwhile, bent his head to his plush rabbit. "What's that, Mr. Fluff? You say this man's energy is frayed, chaotic, a sign of impending catastrophe?" The man stiffened. "You shut your mouth." But Spencer merely lifted his gaze, his dark, empty eyes locking onto the man's. The man's bluster died in his throat, replaced by a sudden, visceral fear. Spencer turned away, speaking to the toy. "My mistake. It's merely a cloud of misfortune clinging to him. My apologies." Once they were in Victor's SUV, Jeremy glanced at Spencer. "I didn't expect you to defend me." Spencer's reply was typically oblique. "Gratitude is unnecessary. However, a detailed account of your romantic history with David would be an acceptable alternative." Victor perked up immediately. "Yeah, Jeremy."
"Spill."
Jeremy leaned back against the seat, gazing out at the passing suburban landscape. He wove a tale drawn from 100 cliches, honed by years of listening to clients' convoluted personal dramas. It was a saga of attraction and denial, of secret tutoring sessions under the guise of extra lessons, of campus walks David insisted were for practical field observation but were, in Jeremy's new telling, clumsy attempts to spend time alone. "I thought he was just tormenting me," Jeremy said, a world-weary sigh in his voice, showing off how easy it all was for him. "When he confessed, I walked away, and then he was gone." Victor nodded, pieces clicking into a false pattern. "So that's why you were always griping about him." "I thought it was just jealousy." It was, Jeremy thought. The original Jeremy had been eaten alive by envy of David's effortless talent, a talent David had subtly flaunted. That bitterness had festered into hatred. "I'd give anything to go back," Jeremy whispered. As if in response, a sudden, violent gust of wind slammed into the side of the vehicle, rocking it. Jeremy looked down at his arm to see goosebumps rising on his skin. He glanced out the window. The trees lining the highway whipped back and forth. Raindrops streaked diagonally across the glass, and for a bizarre moment, one droplet tracing a path by his temple seemed to darken to the color of old blood before vanishing. He looked up, catching Victor's and Spencer's reflections in the rearview mirror. "Nothing else. That explains all the extra tutoring," Spencer remarked, tapping a thoughtful finger against his chin. He was creating opportunities for intimacy. "Yes," Jeremy began, but the word was cut off as the passenger window beside him abruptly spiderwebbed with cracks, emitting a sharp crack. "Whoa!" Victor yelped. What was that? A rock? A new chill, one that felt pointed and personal, whispered across the back of Jeremy's neck. Felt like a cold, assessing touch. He resisted the urge to rub it. "David did want us to be alone," he affirmed. His voice steady despite the constriction he suddenly felt in his throat. The chilling sensation lingered, then faded, leaving only the damaged window. Half an hour later, they pulled up to the Excelsior Hotel. It was a sprawling, garish complex built to resemble a storybook castle, complete with pink and yellow turrets, a local novelty that had once drawn crowds for its themed suites. "Did you review the case file?" Victor asked as they got out. Jeremy shook his head. "I've been distracted." Victor's face filled with a sympathy Jeremy didn't deserve. "It's okay. I'll fill you in." The Excelsior had been a sensation, famed for its fantasy getaway experience. Then, about 6 months prior, things changed. Reviews plummeted. Guests complained of inexplicable headaches, sleep paralysis, and a streak of bad luck following their stays. The management wrote it off until a month ago, when 3 college-aged women from a visiting friend group vanished from their Sleeping Beauty suite. They'd been seen entering their room. By morning, they were gone, with no sign of forced entry or exit on the malfunctioning security feeds. The local authorities flagged it for our department, Spencer stated, his attention seemingly on adjusting Mr. Fluff's bow tie. A successful resolution will provide sufficient CR for me to qualify for the National Metaphysical Symposium. Victor groaned. I'm still way short. They both looked at Jeremy. Jeremy sifted through the original's memories. I have 3 CRS. Their synchronized winces were all the judgment he needed. Okay, test time, Victor said, gesturing at the hotel grounds, trying to shift the subject from Jeremy's academic delinquency. First impression. What's the energy flow like here? The original Jeremy knew nothing. But Jeremy, the landscape architect, had studied environmental psychology and basic geomancy. He scanned the property. The hotel was nestled against wooded hills, with a manicured lawn in front, a small artificial stream to the left, and the main access road to the right. Strong protective positioning, he assessed. Good natural shielding. Should be prosperous. Then he noticed the severe, gray building just beyond the tree line. What's that? County Courthouse, Spencer said. Built 2 years ago. The land was a meatpacking plant before that. Jeremy's eyes narrowed. He pointed to the hotel's west-facing windows. Direct exposure. A courthouse carries the heavy, rigid energy of judgment and conflict. A slaughterhouse leaves a residue of fear and violence. That's a major environmental clash. It's creating a hostile bleed onto the property. Victor looked impressed. Wow, I figured you were just a pretty face. Turns out you might actually know a thing or two. Inside the kitschy lobby, the manager, a Mr. Henderson, was a ball of nervous energy. His hope deflated visibly when he saw them. They sent kids? He moaned, his eyes lingering on Spencer and his rabbit. Spencer's expression remained placid. He called us children. Victor beamed. He's not wrong. Jeremy saw a flicker of long-suffering irritation in Spencer's eyes. He stepped forward. Mr. Henderson, is there a problem? You're just so young, Henderson fretted. Appearances are deceptive, Jeremy said smoothly. We were assigned because we're capable. Especially Spencer. He gestured. That plush isn't a toy. It's a concentrated vessel for residual spiritual energy. Most people couldn't handle being near it. The fact that he should tell you something about his age and experience. He leaned in conspiratorially. Between you and me, he has very particular dietary needs related to his condition. Gets irritable if he goes too long without sustenance. And he hates being underestimated. Tends to make him peckish. Mr. Henderson's face paled. He looked at Spencer with dawning horror. Jeremy gave a regretful sigh. But if you're not comfortable, we can leave. Though Spencer will be disappointed. He was looking forward to investigating such a robust haunting. His eyes flickered over Henderson's portly frame meaningfully. Henderson practically leapt to block their path. No. Stay.
I'm perfectly comfortable.
My apologies, young sirs. Right this way to the suite. As they followed, Victor asked Jeremy what he'd said. Just that Spencer dislikes being patronized, Jeremy replied innocently. Mr. Henderson was very understanding. Victor nodded sagely. Good to see people can still admit when they're wrong. The hotel grounds were extensive, more like a gated community. Passing a gazebo, they saw an elderly woman rocking a chubby toddler. My mother and my boy, Henderson explained. Staying with me for a while. The old woman offered a timid smile as she carried the sleeping child away. Jeremy's gaze fixed on the child's plump wrist. For a second, he thought he saw a faint, dark smudge clinging to it, like a bruise made of smoke. Victor, do you see that? On the kid's arm? Victor squinted. See what? The Sleeping Beauty suite was a riot of pastel pinks and purples. Henderson lingered at the threshold. Fear etched on his face as he recounted the disappearance. The 3 friends had checked in, said goodnight to their male companions in the adjoining room, and vanished. Only a few strands of hair on the pillows suggested they'd ever been there. Other guests reported hearing a basketball being dribbled late at night, and one claimed to have seen a disembodied head bouncing down the hallway. Spencer conducted a methodical survey of the room while Jeremy shadowed him, asking questions. Finally, Spencer straightened. "We'll need to observe after midnight." Victor did a quick calculation on his fingers, his face falling. "The missing girls. It's not good. The signs point to a fatal outcome." After a somber dinner in the hotel's dated restaurant, where Victor and Spencer ate with a startling, competitive fervor, they returned to the suite. Jeremy saw the old woman and the child again in the dining area. The boy was shoveling scrambled eggs into his mouth with a single-minded intensity. The dark smudge on his wrist was still there, pulsating faintly. The grandmother watched with doting pride, murmuring, "Eat up. That's a good boy. Growing so big and strong." Jeremy felt a twist of unease. He approached, making friendly conversation with the grandmother. Her replies were vague, her focus entirely on the child's consumption. "He's a good eater," she said dreamily. "That's what matters." Later, as the boy played in a sandbox, Jeremy approached him with a piece of candy. "Want it?" The boy nodded eagerly. "Okay," Jeremy said, his voice gentle. "But you have to drink this big glass of water for me first. And promise you won't go to the bathroom before bedtime. Deal?" He produced 2 more candies. The boy's eyes lit up, and he guzzled the water, his little belly swelling. Back with the others, Jeremy asked casually, "Is it true that children's urine has certain purifying properties?" Victor snorted. "Yeah, it's an old folk thing." "Why?" "Just curious," Jeremy said, filing the information away. As night fell, Spencer set up a small altar on a desk pushed against the north wall of the suite's common area. A large mirror hung above it. He placed a bowl of uncooked rice and several incense sticks on the desk. "The mirror collects and reflects intangible energies," he explained to Jeremy's questions. "If there's a presence here, it will disturb the incense smoke and guide us." As 11 p.m. approached, the world outside the windows became a pit of black velvet. Victor announced a need for the bathroom, and Spencer and Jeremy, adhering to horror movie logic, joined him. Inside, Victor let out a yelp. Tucked inside the toilet tank was a sealed plastic bag. He fished it out and opened it to reveal a stack of meticulously folded bills printed with the faces of founding fathers and the words for spiritual transactions. "Creepy," Victor muttered, washing his hands vigorously. "Someone's trying to flush their bad luck away, or someone else's good luck." Could explain the hotel's downturn, Jeremy mused. They returned to the main room. Jeremy, seeking to bolster the group's morale, and specifically that of their most physically capable member, turned to Victor. "Look, between the 3 of us, you're the anchor. Spencer's got his specialty. I'm basically a rookie. We're counting on you. If you lose your nerve, what chance do we have?" Victor puffed up slightly, his fear momentarily overshadowed by pride. "You're right. I've got this. I'll protect you guys." Satisfied, Jeremy slipped into the bathroom alone a few minutes later. He washed his face, the cool water a shock. Humming a tuneless song, he looked up into the mirror. His reflection stared back, strikingly handsome, damp hair clinging to his temples. Then his blood ran cold. Livid, dark bruises in the unmistakable shape of a large hand materialized around his neck in the glass. The air left his lungs in a painful rush. An invisible, iron-hard grip tightened, lifting him onto his toes. In the mirror, a faint, gray mist coalesced behind him, formless but menacing. A voice, smooth as silk and cold as a tombstone, whispered directly into his ear, harmonizing eerily with the tune he'd just been humming. "When, precisely, did I profess such undying devotion?" Panic threatened to drown him. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. David's spirit was shattered. But Spencer had said bathrooms, especially at night, were focal points for negative energy. The mirror was a conduit. The grip tightened. Spots danced before Jeremy's eyes. David was going to kill him now, far ahead of schedule, and for no reason other than casual cruelty. No. A fierce, defiant anger surged through the fear. He'd be damned if he'd die cowering. If this monster found his lies entertaining, then he'd give him a show he wouldn't forget. Straining against the crushing pressure, Jeremy braced a foot against the vanity, his body forming a taut arch. He met his own desperate eyes in the mirror and slowly, deliberately, curled his lips into a taunting, adoring smile. "David," he mouthed, the sound a ragged breath. "You love me so much. You came all this way just for me." His expression in the glass was a masterpiece of contradiction. Eyes blazing with mockery, lips shaped for a kiss. He poured every ounce of sarcastic triumph into that look. "You're dead. You can't speak. They all believe me. They'll protect me from you. Your revenge will look like the rage of a jilted lover." The mist behind him seemed to ripple, the cruel humming pausing in what felt like surprise. Fueled by adrenaline and sheer spite, Jeremy gathered the last of his strength. With an explosive twist of his body, he drove his heel backward into the center of the mirror. The world exploded in a shower of glass and a deafening crash. The vice-like grip vanished. He collapsed into the glittering shards as the bathroom door burst open. "Jeremy!" Victor yelled, hauling him up. Spencer moved instantly to stand guard. Jeremy stood, shaking glass from his hair. He was breathing hard, his neck a canvas of brutal purple fingerprints. But he was smiling a wild, exhilarated grin. "He was here," he gasped, his fingers tracing the bruises. "David. He missed me. He wants me to join him." Victor's jaw dropped. "No way. David wouldn't. The divide between the living and the dead is absolute," Spencer said sharply, his gaze boring into Jeremy. "Crossing it is a perversion." But the evidence was on Jeremy's throat. The story, however unbelievable, was taking root. They returned to the main room. At exactly 11:15, Spencer began his ritual. He lit a single stick of sandalwood incense, planting it upright in the bowl of rice. He ignited a yellow paper charm over its flame and dropped the burning paper into a bowl of water, where it continued to smolder until the water turned a murky gray. He poured this over the rice and watched the thin line of smoke. It rose straight for a moment, then shuddered and split, tendrils snaking toward the closed door. A knock interrupted the tense silence. The grandmother's voice called softly, "Boys? Are you awake?" She brought a tray of sandwiches. "For you growing boys," she said, her smile kind but her eyes darting nervously past them into the room. "Don't stay up too late." Victor, ever grateful for food, thanked her and seized the moment. "Ma'am, you've been here a while, right? Noticed anything odd?" The old woman hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. "My daughter-in-law," she whispered. "She's not right. She's changed. She gets so angry. She doesn't let my grandson eat enough. I'm afraid of her sometimes." She clutched her shawl tighter and hurried away. "The daughter-in-law. The manager's wife," Spencer murmured. Her change coincided with the disappearances. After the old woman left, they followed the incense smoke into the hallway. It divided at a T-junction. Spencer stared at the two paths, frozen. "Left," Victor said. "What if it's a trap?" Spencer asked. "Right then. What if that's the trap?" Jeremy understood. Spencer had a paralyzing indecision in the face of binary choices. They arbitrarily chose left, moving up a service staircase. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into utter darkness. Then, from the floor above, they heard it, the distinct rhythmic thump, thump, thump of a ball being bounced. It started slow, then accelerated rapidly, coming straight for them down the pitch-black stairs. Victor gripped Jeremy's shirt from behind. "I really hate the dark," he confessed in a tremulous whisper. The bouncing reached the landing just above them and stopped. In the sudden, thick silence, Spencer whispered. The smoke reversed. "Something passed us." They retreated, found the electrical panel. It wasn't tripped. The power was simply out. As they stood there, a phone rang shrilly from a wall-mounted unit down the hall. Jeremy answered. It was Mr. Henderson, apologizing for the blackout due to road work, and directing them to the maintenance room to activate the backup generator. Guided by Jeremy's memory of the floor plan, they felt their way forward in a chain, Jeremy in front, Victor holding his shirt from behind. After a minute, Jeremy spoke, his voice carefully level. Victor, you're pulling kinda hard. Sorry, Victor's voice came from directly behind him. A few steps later, Jeremy stopped. Victor, do you feel that? Your foot. Feel what? Jeremy's skin crawled. Victor, I think there's someone else between us. A horrified pause. Then Victor, from behind the unseen presence, whimpered, Oh, God. It's cold. Smells rotten. Like wet dirt. Don't move, Spencer instructed, his voice calm. He pressed a paper charm into Jeremy's hand. Its forehead. Aim for the center. Jeremy reached back blindly. His hand didn't meet a forehead. It brushed against something cold, sticky, and unervingly soft. Something small and wriggling squirmed beneath his fingertips. He yanked his hand back, bile rising in his throat. It doesn't have a head. They shuffled forward, the unseen entity in tow, until they reached the maintenance room. Spencer found the backup switch. Fluorescent lights buzzed to life, harsh and glaring. Standing between Jeremy and Victor was a headless corpse in faded, stained prison denim. The next stump was a ragged mess of decay, and things moved beneath the grayish skin. The corpse's feet were pointed toward Victor. Victor screamed. It was facing me the whole time. The corpse, as if activated by the light, lunged. They fled. Spencer, remarkably composed, commented as they ran, Maggots are quite clean, you know. They have antibacterial properties. Less trivia, more action. Jeremy gasped, his lungs burning. The headless thing was fast, and it seemed fixated on him. He pushed his body to its limit, weaving through storage racks. Spencer had produced a large, black-meshed net from seemingly nowhere. This way, Jeremy. With a final burst of speed, Jeremy shot past the support column. Spencer yanked a cord, and the net descended, enveloping the headless corpse. It thrashed, its skin sizzling where the net touched it, filling the air with a sickening odor. Victor, panting, joined them. Why was it after you? Jeremy, wiping his hands raw with a disinfectant wipe, glanced at his own dark, shoulder-length hair. It's from another era. Probably had long hair. It might have mistaken my hair for its missing head. He looked at the netted form. The bouncing ball we heard. That must have been its head, searching. Spencer nodded grimly. The three missing girls all had long hair. That bastard. Victor snarled, convinced. Jeremy wasn't so sure. Where were the bodies? But he kept his doubts to himself. The incense had burned low. They followed the other strand of smoke to a room on a different floor. It was empty, but the smoke snaked under the bed. Spencer commanded whatever was there to come out. With a soft thump, a head rolled into view. It was a man's, with long, matted hair and a pale, gaunt face from a bygone century. One eye peered out from the greasy strands. Good evening, it said, its voice oddly formal. Your companion's locks are most lustrous. Might I inquire as to his haircare regimen? Victor, recoiling, eventually picked it up. The head identified itself as Phineas, a petty thief executed centuries ago on grounds that were now a courthouse parking lot. I seek a tailor to reattach me to my corpus, it explained mournfully. For a time, the lady of this house showed promise. I observed her late at night sewing, mending herself as it were. But she was never here when I came calling. Mending herself? Jeremy repeated. Indeed, a most skilled needlewoman, though her own canvas was distressed. Alas, she and the master of the house quarreled incessantly. They keep separate chambers now. This aligned with what the grandmother had hinted. Jeremy's theory was crystallizing. They secured the head and the headless body together and called Mr. Henderson. The manager, sleepy and confused, confirmed his wife had been acting strangely, wearing heavier makeup, staying out during the day, only returning to sleep in their son's room at night. She refused to speak to him. "We need to see her now," Spencer said. In the family's apartment, they found her. She was standing rigidly at the foot of the bed where the grandmother and the child slept. She turned as they entered. Jeremy's breath caught. The woman was a grotesque patchwork of human parts, crudely stitched together with thick, black thread. Her features were misaligned, her skin a mosaic of different tones and textures. A thick, black, smoke-like aura writhed around her. Mr. Henderson crumpled to the floor with a choked cry. The patchwork woman snarled, not at them but at the bed, at the child. Spencer acted. He bit his own thumb and pressed the bleeding wound against the mouth of his rabbit plush. "Mr. Fluff," he commanded. The plush's glass eyes seemed to gleam. It slid from his arms and began to walk, with stiff, unnatural steps, toward the monstrous wife. Spencer pushed Jeremy and Victor out of the room and shut the door. Outside, on the small balcony, Jeremy accepted a cigarette from a shell-shocked Mr. Henderson. They smoked in silence, the manager babbling about his failing business, his neglect, his guilt. "You knew, didn't you?" Jeremy said suddenly, his voice quiet but sharp. "The energy in your apartment. The layout favors the male occupant, clashes with the female. In your culture's symbology, your sign clashes with hers. You're a detail-oriented man, Mr. Henderson. You chose this land for its good energy. You had to know the effect your own home was having. You just didn't care enough to fix it." Henderson stared at him, his face crumbling, but offered no denial. Spencer emerged 15 minutes later, looking drained. The wife was gone. Mr. Fluff was back in his arms, inert. She was a composite, Spencer stated flatly. Her form contained the remains of at least 3 others. "The case is resolved." But Jeremy wasn't satisfied. Back downstairs in the lobby, he sat on the steps. "Wait," he said. "For what?" Victor asked. "For a scream. Or for a little boy to wet the bed." They stared at him. "You don't think she was the killer?" Spencer asked. "She was a victim," Jeremy said softly, the pieces clicking into a terrible whole. "What if something ate her? Ate those other girls? And she fought her way out of its stomach. She gathered what was left of the others and sewed herself back together because she had to protect her son." He looked at them, his eyes serious. "What if there's a thing that can look like a person? That slips into a home, wears their clothes, eats the family one by one? Consumes everything, leaving no trace but a few hairs on a pillow. Is there such a thing?" Victor's face went white. Spencer's fingers tightened on his plush. In unison, they breathed the name, a skinwalker, a predator that wore the skin of its victims, living among families until it consumed them all. Upstairs, in the quiet apartment, Mr. Henderson finally drifted into a troubled sleep beside his son. He awoke with a start to see a figure standing by the bed. "Mom?" he mumbled, fumbling for the lamp. The old woman smiled, her teeth stained red. "Go back to sleep, son." She was chewing. He looked down and saw, with dawning, paralyzing horror, that she was chewing on his arm, which was already a mess of blood and torn flesh. He tried to scream, but only a dry rasp emerged. As she bent to take another bite, he thrashed, his elbow jamming into his son's bloated stomach. The pressure was too much. The boy, deep in sleep, released a torrent of urine, soaking the bed. The old woman, the skinwalker, recoiled with a shriek of rage and pain, the purifying liquid burning its stolen skin. That scream was the signal. Jeremy, Victor, and Spencer raced upstairs. They burst in to find the monster hissing by the window, its grandmother disguise melting into a raw, bloody, faceless thing. Victor tackled it, but its borrowed skin tore away. Spencer sent Mr. Fluff into the fight. It was a vicious, brutal struggle. Jeremy, holding the chatty head of Phineas, had an idea. "Phineas, old buddy. Do me a favor? Anything for you, fair sir." The head simpered. "Thanks." With a grunt, Jeremy wound up and threw the head like a bowling ball. It struck the skinwalker square in the back, stunning it. Victor and Spencer pounced, smothering it in a blanket doused in lighter fluid and setting it alight. As the police and paranormal containment unit later processed the scene, Jeremy approached the sleeping child one last time. He touched the fading dark smudge on the boy's wrist. A flood of sensations and memories, not his own, assaulted him. The terror of being eaten alive, the crushing darkness, the desperate, clawing love for a child, the agonizing reassembly of a broken body from scraps of strangers, all for the single purpose of standing guard. The overwhelming, self-sacrificing power of a mother's love crashed over him. A force so raw and real it stole his breath and brought unbidden, hot tears to his eyes. He crouched, fighting for control, moved in a way he'd never thought possible. In the government vehicle taking them back to campus, a kind officer assured them their academic CR was secure. Jeremy was silent, staring out the window. Spencer, observing his pensiveness, explained more about their world. "Our program exists in 12 universities nationwide. Few have the talent, perhaps 100 students in total. The authorities funnel cases to us. That's how we learn, how we contribute." He paused. David's family, the Graves Consortium, they specialized in spirit binding and animation, controlling both the living and the dead. David was the only one in generations to truly master it. His eyes could be anywhere. Jeremy's gaze swept over the officers and agents around them. For a fleeting second, a polite smile from a passing technician seemed to twist, the eyes behind it glinting with a familiar, malicious intelligence. He blinked, and it was gone. He shook his head, a wry, tired smile touching his lips. Paranoia. In the story, David was weak, fragmented, needing Marcus's help. He couldn't be puppeteering people already, but the seed of doubt was planted, and Jeremy knew better than to ignore it. He leaned his head against the cool window glass, the phantom ache of bruises on his throat a constant reminder. The game had begun, and he had no intention of losing.